Kia ora, everyone, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. Look, I'm really excited to be hosting this webinar on a topic that's becomingly increasingly relevant for indie developers, which is shadow publishing. For many studios, especially those early in their journey or working with small teams, traditional publishing models can feel a little out of reach or too rigid. At the same time, self-publishing brings its own challenges when it comes to visibility, marketing, and platform support. And that's where shadow publishing comes in, a more flexible behind-the-scenes model that offers support without taking over creative control and often without the same expectations as traditional publishing deals. I'm Joy Keene, the Executive Director at the New Zealand Game Developers Association, and I am thrilled to be joined by Ben and Jen from Midwest Games, who are doing some fantastic work in this space. They'll be sharing their insights on how shadow publishing works, who it suits, and how it can help studios grow sustainably while keeping ownership of their work. Just a quick note before we begin, this webinar is being recorded and we'll make the recording available afterwards so you can rewatch or share it with your team. You are welcome to drop your questions into the chat at any time during the session, and we'll keep an eye on those and do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ben and Jen.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Kvalo. I am the founder and CEO of Midwest Games. Very excited to chat with you today and talk about publishing holistically, and then what is this thing called shadow publishing, and what does it mean? What is the value, and what is the trade-off compared to traditional publishing? So I'm excited to chat through that, but I'll let Jen introduce herself first.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Jen Corbett. I oversee our marketing for both our portfolio games and the clients we represent in our shadow publishing.
Awesome. So we'll be guiding you through this little journey of publishing today, but excited to jump right in and excited for questions as well. So, first, who are we so that you kind of understand where we're coming from, what we're doing, and what we believe in as well. I have a long history in publishing at companies like 2K, Blizzard, Netflix. I was on the Netflix Films team, Netflix Games team, helped to build that from the ground up before building Midwest Games. And so, if what we do at Midwest Games is focus on how can we be a comprehensive publisher and provide services that are key towards success when you're going to market. And so we coined this term called shadow publishing, and it's really focused around how do you retain your rights and revenue while still getting the services that you're looking for as you go. So your game, our support. So some of our team, just so you have visibility into who we are, what we do, uh, some validation on what we know a little bit of what we're talking about. Obviously, we've introduced myself and Jen, but Chris Klemecki has a long history, 30 plus years in games. Also, shout out to Tony Lawrence because Tony and I go back to the 2K days.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Tony. And then Elizabeth Howard is also one of our chief advisors on the shadow publishing end of things. And so we cover all the bases for publishing, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit here. So what is this publishing thing? Uh what is this beast that some people think, oh, just this marketing aspect of things. Oh, they just take our rev share and don't do anything and things like that, which it just ultimately isn't true. There's a huge value to what a publisher does, what it brings to the table, and why it's important that even if you don't have a publisher, that you're doing some of the activities that a publisher focuses in and around on. So how does a publisher work? So you can think of it as the business side of games, creating value by supporting developers, helping them release games. providing many different aspects: funding, marketing, production, focusing on distribution, where you're putting your games out. And there's a lot of unique ways and unique platforms that you might not have even heard of. Managing the storefront, if anyone's ever worked on assets and asset management and trying to do that across different languages, across different storefronts, it's a very complicated piece of things. Providing business strategy, all the fun legal aspects of things, thinking about the risk management of everything that you're doing. Because essentially what a publisher really does is focus around how do you de-risk creative business, something that has a lot of risk involved in it, but can you make it less risky? And so publishers are thinking about that. And then what a publisher does is manage a portfolio. Think about the multiple titles, the multiple things happening all at one time. And then it has, we work with a lot of different, I think, levers. One piece is obviously revenue, rev share. You hear that a lot. You hear intellectual property a lot, but there's a lot of other levers as well. I look at it as like there's five essential levers of what a publisher is working with, and how it can ultimately generate revenue, support developers, and rev share and IP are two of those levers. But there's also levers like recoup, and how do you pull back like some of the spends that you have as a publisher? How do you bring that back and kind of de-risk your project by recouping those costs, typically at a higher percentage over time? Retainers, this is where shadow publishing comes in, where you can have a payment up front, which means where you get less on the back end. It all has values in a standpoint of short term, mid-term, long term, and the value kind of changes depending on what it is. And then the final lever being ultimately equity in the studio, which for the most part venture capital firms deal with equity in studios, and that's where their investment lever is. But each of those five levers are different areas that, as we look at publishing and supporting developers, you have to think about those as value points that you can pull and move around to create a deal. And a publisher is always thinking about how that deal is. If you have a push and pull on one end, it might change the rev share percentages down the line as well. So the bulk of publishers' work. Jen can talk a lot more to kind of the marketing aspect of things, and I can dive into some of the other areas.
Yeah, I think as you all probably know, there's more games than ever, more and more every year. And so really standing out is just a huge challenge. Standing out to the right players and then retaining their interest all the way up until your launch is a long road. And so what my team does as we work with clients and on our own titles, we start with research, really trying to figure out who that audience is, what they're playing now, what other competition there is, and how do we speak to them with our game at hand. We really work on a marketing plan that's in line with production. And then it changes all the time. We find things that work, we dive deeper into that. Some things don't work. And so we shift our plan. And so it's really like this living and breathing marketing roadmap that we need to follow through the game's trends and falls.
Another aspect is the production piece of things. So if you're thinking about, ultimately milestone planning out your roadway to ultimately getting a game out, the release management aspect of things, QA, localization, certification. A lot of people just don't think about the pain points of certification and going to a platform, and the fact that each platform has a different certification process and what that is, being registered, all that kind of stuff. And then age ratings. If you're going to consoles, the necessity of age ratings and what that process is. So a lot of coordination on the production side with timelines, budget, and all of that management. And then strategy. A lot of pieces of what publishing does is the strategy around what to do, when to do it, how to do it, who to do it with, and really thinking through like what is the best way for this specific game to go to market, because every game is different and you have to approach it different. As much as you might have tactics that work for one game, it might not work for another game. And then ultimately trying to figure out, okay, what are the things that I can create that ultimately bring in revenue, distribution deals and licensing. Or maybe you want an IP, somebody else's IP, licensing of someone else's IP. And how does that benefit? What is the expected additional units sold based on that IP? And understanding those pieces, setting up partnerships, and figuring out release time, and what is the strategy around going to market, and how do you get ultimately to that place that you are setting everything up perfectly so you go to market with the biggest possible moment. And there's a lot of strategy that goes behind that. Now, there's a lot of luck too. Yeah, hopefully some other giant game doesn't surprise, announce, or launch right around that time frame. Hopefully, it lines up. You get a more open window, but there's so much congestion in market. It's really hard to do that. So it's about building a lot of the different tactics and a lot of different partnerships that help you stand out in comparison to your competition. Okay. But do you need a publisher? Like, do you really need a publisher? Uh, Ultimately, no, you don't technically need a publisher. But what I will say is publishers win way more often than self-published titles. Like, and it's a dramatic, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. But what you really need is some of the publishing planning capabilities. Some of it you can do yourself, and thinking through how you are going to go to market, how you're going to build your community, the strategy behind it, thinking about some of the business areas. If you don't have a publisher, you need to be thinking about how you're setting up your business for long-term success. Anyone that's building a game development studio is an entrepreneur building a business. And if you don't have a publisher supporting that, that means you need to take it on yourself. And some folks have that background, maybe have a degree in business, and are thinking about those aspects. And if you don't, it means that you need to learn some of those things, and what are the best practices. And so some of it you can absolutely build. And in fact, I think every studio should have an aspect of publishing within their studio to be thinking about that go to market. But what you can't do is you can't wait until your game is complete and then try to think about the publishing and releasing of a game. Your chance of success is almost zero at that point statistically. And it's just the more you're thinking about these different buckets, these different things that you have to ultimately fill, the better your chances of success. Okay, so what are some current challenges in the market? And a lot of you are going to be very familiar with what these are, but I'm going to highlight some key things that I'm seeing as well and that we're seeing. You look 10, 11 years ago, and there was about 300 games coming out on Steam a year. Last year, there was 19,000 games that came out. This year, I think there's going to be probably about 25,000 based on the trajectories and numbers and things like that. Yet, there's still only about 300 games succeeding every year. And so that means that if there's 25,000 games that come out this year, there's only 300 that are going to succeed. You have a 0.00012% chance of being one of those 300. And if you have a publisher, your chances increase dramatically. But only about 1.74% of games on Steam have a publisher. They generate between Steam's data is not exact, so that's why I say about. They generate about 67 to 78% of initial units sold. And then if you count in microtransactions, which we don't have as much data around. But you can guesstimate publishers are more likely to have microtransactions and additional ways of generating revenue. You're talking about 90+% of revenue is generated by that small percentage. So your chances of success increase by having these publishing levers, whether it be a traditional publisher or some of the aspects of publishing that really, really matter. So it makes a huge difference, especially as we get into a more and more consolidated market, that you are thinking about these things. But we very much believe that you don't have to necessarily go the traditional route. It's more so the pieces of publishing that are so important. And if you're integrating those pieces in, you're giving yourself a better chance overall. Also, I mean, some of these stats have been widely shared on LinkedIn and many other places. 80% of games make less than $5,000. And ultimately, just the the volume, the challenges of standing out, just create enormous challenges. And also, older games are retaining most of the audience. 60% of games are what, 5 years or older, that are played by folks. So you're competing in a smaller chunk of the audience. And so you just have to know these things. It's part of the challenge that we all have in front of us. And if we better know this data and think about how do we attack this challenge, I think we're better equipped to actually be able to overcome it and swing it the other way. And I think that 60% can be fought against, but we have to be thinking about how we grab the attention of a market that is playing games they're comfortable with, playing games that their friends are playing, that they know that they can go and jump on something like Roblox or Fortnite or Minecraft, and they know that their friends are going to be there. And ultimately, if we realize that, maybe there's a way to better capture attention of not just an individual, but their friend group as well. Also, the investor market is in a tough place. I've felt it myself, running a startup, trying to raise money myself, and doing that the last 2 years. So I'm on the front line of having to do that and feeling the pains and challenges of that. There are fewer investors. The bar is so high to get investment these days, especially for game developers. I know many feel like they ultimately have to have an almost finished game with a proven audience to then even get a chance to get money and support in. And it's a challenge. Now, if we think about it though, and if we look back at the data, really what happened was during COVID, there was an overinvestment into games, a massive overinvestment with what some people call silly money. And it made games it made games publishers really step back from investing in games, and it gave an outsized idea of what the market was. But if we go before that, we're actually pretty much in line with what investment was before COVID. And and so we're actually, if we think about it, we just have to get to a place where, okay, maybe we need to pace ourselves differently. With most startups, you start with a pre-seed and then a seed, and then maybe you will have to take a bridge, or maybe you will get to a Series A, a Series B, a Series C, and there's step processes to raise money, prove things out over time, and then continue to be able to build and raise money and get to the point where you have a ton of value, your product's out of market, maybe you never have to raise again, or maybe you sell the company at that point. We need to treat things a little bit more like that, because of this big fundraise, like you're not getting deals for $3 million games, $10 million games. And we used to, there was a lot of, during the 2020, 2022 period, there was insane deals happening. And so that market is not coming back. And there's a lot of competition coming in. It's easier than ever to make a game. And so we have to realize that platforms, I think, will eventually change in some ways, but they haven't yet. It's still $100 US. I don't know the equivalents. But it's really easy to put out a game now, and until they raise or change the barriers, that's going to continue to be a challenge, and we never know when that's going to be. So just realize what the current market is, and when we have to do more. But if we start to treat everything more like an entrepreneur, think about each of these steps along the way to raise, know that you have to create value in each of these steps, have proof points in each of the steps. It can get to the point where we can ultimately get to a game release. You just have to treat it like a step-by-step process. And some of the new investment criteria that exist today, anything that has known IP is really, really valuable right now because it allows you to cut through an audience easier because there's an existing audience that is there, and hopefully you can expand upon that. Developer credibility definitely helps, although I would say a lot of investors have been burned by this. So how long that will help is TBD. I think a lot will have been avoiding certain game developers that got massive investment and didn't churn out things. So that's kind of an iffy, but it still is something that exists. Um, anything that is later stage, close to ship, is getting more investment. And part of it goes to the point of you have proof points, you have wish lists, you have social support and community that you can prove out and show that you have these things. And there's a quicker moment to return the potential funds that someone is investing into something. And so that timeline is always something that's really valuable, whether it be in a VC or a publisher or somebody else that is looking to return their money and their investment. If you have your core
And
loop, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to add one other thing that we didn't have on the slide is even if you don't have that traction to speak of yet, being in a genre that is top selling is a great place to be. If you don't have the wish list or if you haven't even launched a Steam page yet, if you're a crafty colony sim builder on Steam right now, you're a step ahead of the game, and publishers are really looking at genres right now because there just are so many risks. And so they're really not taking content risks on lower performing genres.
And know the trend of the genre. Obviously, like something like Vampire Survivors um, game was really successful for a while, but it's trending down. Doesn't mean it can't have success, but the folks that are paying attention to the numbers, the trends, are less likely to invest in it. But also know who you're talking to. If it's somebody that has had success in that genre before, they might be more open to an investment in that because they can take their existing audience and serve your game to it. So definitely know your audience that they're talking to. Uh, and then I talked a little bit to the market traction piece of things already. Uh, any kind of wish list traction or audience engagement, you had a TikTok go viral, whatever it is, demo success or demo ratings, like highly rated demo. People are really enjoying it. Even if you don't maybe have as many wish lists, but you can show that kind of traction, that's super helpful. And some current opportunities. So despite the challenges, there are definitely opportunities. Mobile is an interesting market, and I think going to change pretty dramatically in this next era of things. We're seeing cloud emerge. We're seeing ultimately the fact that you can play premium products, like truly like premium, typically only on PC products on mobile. Mobile's very accessible, but I do think it's changing. I think free to play mobile is going to adjust. It is really tough to be successful in that area. It's really tough to be successful in the existing platforms that exist for mobile. But we know because of lawsuits that entire ecosystem is about to be disrupted and changed. with that comes a lot of opportunity. Um, Global consumers, like we continue to rise. I think we're getting closer and closer to what, 4 billion gamers worldwide. So that is great, but also different languages. You have to pay attention to new markets. I saw in my time, at Netflix, like the LATAM market was huge and growing and really consuming an enormous amount of game content. And so uh, don't ignore non-English markets because they can bring an incredible amount of value, and know what those markets care about. There's certain markets that care about certain types of games more than others. And so make sure you don't just look at the surface data when it comes to localization. Roblox obviously continues to grow. All of these kinds of platforms. Now, each of them really have a struggle from a standpoint of rev share models, and how the rev share models are not good on those platforms. Makes it really tough to be sustainable. Very few companies succeed consistently on those platforms, but they are appealing because it is a easier entry point, a great way to test out ideas. So make sure you know the platform well and what you're doing. And I'm really excited about Discord and the potential, because what Discord really does is it cuts through noise, because you can go direct to the consumer in a unique way where they are ultimately living and breathing and hanging with their friends. And the fact that there's about 3,000 games on Discord, and how big that audience is, it's a really interesting one. And then, even if you're not releasing games on it, going to it to build an audience that really cares about what you're creating, and how you engage them is vital towards how you build that community. So we're still investing. Well, there's still investment all over the place. There's still many different options, whether it be private funding with venture, and then publishers and platforms are doing investment. There's folks like Samsung, LG, TV platforms that are trying to go direct to consumer. um, there's folks like Netflix and others that are building interesting new ways of engaging with games. And then always there's Kickstarter and other routes to try to get early revenue that ultimately will help you build out kind of the beginning pieces, or to have those proof points that you can build on later. So, uh, what does that mean for developers? You have to plan for self-sufficiency. You cannot count on funding. You have to figure out a way to get to a point that you bring some value to the table, or prove some point out, or some audience out, because funding is definitely not automatic. In fact, very few folks will get it. And utilize government programs and other areas that ultimately could get you the funds to help you catapult into that next stage of funding. So wherever you can find it, get creative. You have to focus on traction, polish. It's the feedback I get too with my own company. You've got to have traction. You have to show what you're doing. You have to prove that that what you're saying is happening out in the environment. And if you're able to do that, money comes. I know plenty of studios that made the proof points, and then they got massive investments. And so the great thing is it's still there. It's just harder to get. And so the folks that can learn, be savvy about it, and adjust, will still be able to find ways of getting funding. And a publishing plan is just so incredibly important. Think early about this. Think about it all the way through. Always be evaluating your market, and if it's changing. One of the big challenges is game development takes time, and ultimately the market you might have had when you started development might not exist when you're about to go to market or halfway through development. So you should be checking that all the way through, and making sure that you're thinking about the entire process, the marketing, the distribution, the potential partnerships. That you're getting featured in showcases, that you're getting your game in as many places as possible. And again, that's why it's valuable to have a publisher. Even just having extra hands to do all those things is enormously valuable because there is so much to do, and so much you could be doing, and you have to ultimately prioritize your time, and that takes away from game development, which is ideally what game developers would be able to focus on. Um, and where are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? If you can identify what your actual strengths are, and nobody can do everything. Uh, you can get and focus on the help you need, and also try to not give up too much. A publisher can do many, many, many things, but if you know that you need something specific because that's your weakness, you can hone in on that piece, and that might cost you less in rev share or in dollars spent or in many other ways. But you have to focus in on what is that strength and weakness. Okay, so that brings us a little bit to shadow publishing. So this side of publishing is essentially flipping everything on its head. So if a traditional publisher is focused around uh, ownership of rev share and IP and having long-term strings attached, and they invest a bunch of money up front to do that, shadow publishing is about keeping ownership with the developer, keeping the rights with the developer, and giving flexibility for a developer to be able to pay for the service, and have that available when it's needed, and have a partner that they can bring in whenever desired, and be that strategic partner throughout the process. And so it changes everything. Now the challenge is, as we were just talking about, like not everyone has the money for this kind of stuff. But if as you're going and planning out, well, how am I going to pay for this game? What am I going to need? You need to be accounting for the publishing services that are going to be needed. And shadow publishing is a way of doing that for those that do plan for that. And it allows you to keep your rev share, keep your IP rights, and keep control of everything. uh, Shadow publishing is meant to be a full service, and full support, service overall, meaning that if you go to a marketing agency, you're going to get marketing. They're not going to give you any advice on production. They're not going to tell you that your localization's late. They're not going to think about the strategic pieces that are outside of the marketing piece of things. And what shadow publishing does is that we're thinking about it holistically. You might hire us only for the marketing, but we're going to point out that we should be starting QA right now. Now, you might not hire us to manage that, but we're going to point it out because we're thinking about the project holistically, and you can hire us to do everything, or you can hire us to do something specific. um Services, here's how the four buckets we look at. And again, it can be a la carte, it can be the full comprehensive support, but it's the business strategy, it's the full production planning all the way, from the beginning to release and past release, and ensuring that that is all smooth. It is the marketing, and then developer services, porting, co-dev. You need an art house to support some of the things that you're doing. We have connections with those pieces. And because we drive volume, we also pre-negotiate some deals and try to make it even better than if you were to go to some of these folks yourself. So that is a quick overview, and we want to leave time for some questions. If you ever if you want to know what shadow publishing is, or other areas that I didn't quite answer in this, and happy to kind of dive in.
Cool. Thanks so much, Ben. That was really interesting. There is a question from Ayla in the chat, and if anybody else has questions, please just pop them in there. Ayla says, I have been in some conversations lately that have seemed to suggest that investing and funding capital is rising in 2025 compared to the last couple of years. Have you heard similar rumors or know of any data?
It is so Q4 2024 was the worst quarter of investment in 5 years. So yeah, it's going up, but that doesn't mean much, truly. So yeah, it is going up, and it will go up. I mean, if investment was going up and then it hit a huge spike, but if you think about it going from the pre-2020 to what it is now, it is going up. And if we ignore that spike, it's almost a line that is slightly going up. So I do think that investment will continue. This is a giant industry that has enormous potential and opportunity. And investors are getting a little bit more savvy. You also have to realize that venture capital has only really been in games since about 2017. You can probably go a year plus or minus on that. And so it hasn't been around that long. It's learning some of the lessons that publishers have learned in the industry for a long period of time, but it's learning them the hard way. So I know many of them have taken lessons and are adjusting, or looking at reinvestments. They're also, waiting for some exits from some of the previous investments and starting to maybe reinvest in them. And some of the ones that didn't work out are failing and disappearing. But there is definitely interest in games. It's not going to be at the volume that it was from 2020 to 2022, but it is slightly going up.
Awesome. Hunter is asking, why has Midwest Games switched to shadow publishing rather than a partnering model? What are the benefits for Midwest?
Well, so we do both. We still have traditional publishing. We have a number of projects that we're supporting, games like The Legend of Babu, Tomb Water, Floor is What. Tomb Water is a demo if you want to play that. And so we're still doing some of that. But part of what we see is an opportunity to grow another arm. And that's what we've done is we've grown another arm of our business, talking to what publishing is. We're a de-risking function. We're thinking about the holistic system and the models and everything like that. And so for Midwest Games, we saw a path to better support developers in a different type of model, and we're uniquely positioned to do that. We're in I don't know how many folks are familiar with the Midwest in the U.S., but it's essentially the middle of the country, northern middle of the U.S. It's a lower cost region, but a lot of talent comes from there. There's a lot of successful titles that are made, in Madison, Wisconsin, games like Call of Duty, PUBG, Apex Legends, Elder Scrolls Online, part of Diablo 4 is developed in Madison, Wisconsin. And so I see an opportunity because we are at a lower cost, our margins are different, that we can support in a very different kind of way. And so it's really taking advantage of the fact that we can do this. And I just thoroughly believe that industry needs to be challenged in with different models, and that there's a lot of opportunity with that we can actually create a larger thriving business by supporting developers in new ways. And that's ultimately why we grew the second arm.
Fabulous. B is asking, what is your advice for those who are making a game that is a bit more risky because it's a genre that is quite saturated? How do we approach publishers to focus on the project's potential success?
Yeah. So how's it going to stand out? How's it going to be different? It's plenty of people have iterated on saturated genres and come up with big successes. But you can't just copy what has been done before, and then get feedback, get thoughts, talk to publishers that have published games in that genre. See if you can get some time just to even get advice. One of the big a great piece of advice I got one time is if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. And so go to people and ask for advice, and ask for their thoughts and try to get feedback and see what they think. And especially folks that have experience with that genre, and they might tell you some things that might help you. And they also might be like, whoa, this actually has incredible opportunity off of what I know about the genre. And so that would be one way of doing it. Obviously, having some of those conversations is tough. I found, and I love LinkedIn, is people are quite approachable. Now, they're not approachable if you are just looking to get something from them. If you're looking to use them, if you're just like treating them like a path rather than building a bridge. If you're building a bridge with people, you're asking advice, you're trying to get thoughts, you're being curious, you're much more likely to get a positive response or get a response at all from folks that might have these experiences.
Fab. That was really interesting. Hunter is asking, how do you see the business to business or business to industry market versus the business to consumer market?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time going back to like understanding the market. Okay, if we know that 60% of games uh, are games that are 5+ years old, it means we have, those games are highly successful. Well, each of those games is trying to improve, iterate. What if you provide a service to them or some kind of benefit or collaboration or so there's a lot of B2B opportunities right now. If you can create value for some of these games or efficiency or some other areas that they're looking for, there's a lot of B2B opportunities out there right now. And we even see it with shadow publishing. Some of the areas are that ultimately if we're a flexible resource for folks, we fit many different gaps. And there's a lot of gaps in every single company. And so if we can just be that and be a helpful hand, we are solving a problem for somebody else, and that brings value, and people want to hire us for that. So yeah, I see a ton of value in that, and I think especially during this time when it's harder to survive, it's about surviving. And if you bring value to somebody else, even if it's not your end game, it could get you to your end game by just simply surviving through the tough period.
Excellent. I have a question that somebody's texted me. You mentioned very briefly community building, and they note that quite a few of the most successful games that have come out of New Zealand in the last couple of years have had huge communities built. So the question is, what is the best way to do that? What's your advice around the best way to build communities? And then they have a follow-up question, are events a good way of building success for your game?
Mhm. Uh, Communities are something I've been fascinated with for a long time and love this aspect. I would say start early. That's a huge benefit to your success. It takes a really long time to build a community, and almost always it is notch by notch, person by person. Rarely do you get these big jumps or viral moments. And so start early and just start. Pick a platform or two that you feel comfortable on. Don't necessarily think you need to be on every social platform. And I would say just test out different content styles. Maybe it's just speaking as the developer, funny moments from your game, more polished assets, and just see what people are responding to. We do a lot of early testing when we first introduce our games, just to see like what's getting the most views, what's getting the most comments, what do we like about both of these things. Um, and then there are places too, like Discord, where you can set those up and do light management. But if you do have a community of interested players and then eventual players, they can do a lot of that community building work themselves. And that's actually one of the best places to be, is when it's more peer-to-peer in a community. So I would say, start small and start early. And then events, I do love events. I think they're really great for maybe forming more connections, whether that's industry contacts or even just friends, people who want to play your game and give you feedback. Rarely do I find them to be really great for building your audience and your player base. Some do, some it really works. They are the star of that show, but I think that's far in between. So I would say go to events or spend money or time on events for feedback, um, rather than really thinking that's going to be a big return for you.
Fab, thanks.
Network. I'll plus one on the events to network and to build, especially B2B type of contacts. Like there are some incredible events for that, or collaboration, or meeting people that you might want to build something with. Networking is such a huge key to being successful in this industry. And the folks you meet at that will become the advocates, will become the folks that provide good advice, that will connect you to somebody else. Again, treat everything as a relationship, and a long-term relationship, that you're building bridges, because you don't know when that bridge might really help you. It could be 10 years from now. But so don't treat people as transactional beings. Like, it is ultimately that you want to bring value to them, and they likely will bring value to you. It's a piggy bank philosophy, where put money into your piggy bank. Always do it. Don't worry about how much is in there. At some point, maybe you need to open it up and use some of that. But just continue to put it in, and you'll be surprised what you have at the end of the day, and it will bring a lot of value.
I love that. I really do. Um, Great question, James. What are the key objectives or KPIs that should be set when engaging with a shadow publisher?
The key KPIs to be set. Well, I mean, the key to just engaging a shadow publisher is you have to have money to engage in shadow publishing. You should have a good idea of what is your pathway, or what do you want your pathway to be, and how, what are the things that you feel are the strengths versus the weaknesses, and how could a shadow publisher come in and really help you uh, accentuate the strengths and reduce those weaknesses as much as possible. Because part of what the value of a publisher in general is, whether it be shadow publishing or any other kind, is that we add jet fuel. We take something that you've started a fire, you've started something, and we make it bigger. We bring more people in. We connect you to new partners. And so, if you have a good idea of where you want to go, what you want to do, we can help with that. Now, we'll also provide advice and say, we disagree with that. Maybe we don't feel like that is the best path. But at least you have an opinion on something. So have an opinion of where you want to go, what you want to go after, and then be open to feedback and be ready to adapt and change, because you'll have to adapt and change a million times.
Ayla's done something based on your advice there, Ben. She's put a note in the chat that she is happy to connect and build bridges with anyone in this chat. Good on you, Ayla. Sometimes networking is a little bit uncomfortable, and I commend you on putting it out there like that. Good stuff. Bees asked, how have I'm presuming it's triple A games, changed the industry, and what publishers expect from indie teams?
Or triple I, because there's also the whole new term of triple I games, which is essentially like really expensive indie games, or higher level indie games. Um, how they've changed. I don't think they've changed much. Again, if you go back to the data around who is making the most revenue, I think we get a little bit excited at times when we see a big indie success or a triple I success, something like, Power World or others. And we forget that they're still, in that realm of less than 10% of the revenue. And so I don't think it's changed anything drastically. It's always great to see it. But I think the biggest key to building out the indie, the triple I space, the double A space, is we have to create more sustainable studios that that can continue to iterate over time and grow. That's why I'm such a fan of the shadow publishing model, because it allows a developer to keep their revenue, keep their IP, and it gives them a chance to iterate and grow and grow and grow into that space. And right now, we're in a world where you get one try and you're out. And video game development is all about iteration, and all the data shows it. Most developers do not get to the millions of dollars of revenue on average until their sixth to eighth game. So you need to be able to iterate, and our current system does not focus on the ability to iterate and grow over time, but that is the biggest key. So ultimately, I hope these triple I studios reinvest those dollars, think about how they can continue to build, continue to grow, continue to sustain. And if so, we will start to grow that middle market, and we'll start to grow what triple I is, and whatever it's meant to become. But we need those folks to really treat their studio like a business, and reinvest those dollars in, and hopefully reinvest some dollars into other studios that are that size. And we've seen some of that, which is really exciting when an indie studio has had a lot of success, reinvests in others around them.
Awesome. And thanks for correcting me. I had no idea that
Oh no,
triple I existed. So thank you
it's
for
a
that.
newer thing. So it's, yeah.
No problem. Unless there's any other questions, we'll probably leave it at here. Just a very big thank you to Ben and to Jen, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We hope that the session has given you a clearer understanding of shadow publishing and how it might, excuse me, how it might support your studio's journey. As always, NZGDA is here to support and connect the game development community. If you have follow-up questions or want to get in touch with us or Midwest Games, you can reach out to us via info@nzgda.com, or feel free to contact me directly, joy@nzgda.com. Keep an eye on our channels for more upcoming events. In particular, we have an informative session coming up in 2 weeks' time with the team at Immigration New Zealand, where we'll walk through the current and recently updated immigration settings and what they mean for studios. We'll share this recording of today's session very shortly. Thank you so much. Ka kite, take care, and we'll see you next time.